That if you understand the ecology of a forest, you know what to look for and how to find it, and what materials tend to be dry even when everything else is wet. If you understand the woods, if you understand your woods, not a big deal to get a fire going in the woods. Don't need to split wood even after an entire day of rain. Not a problem, right? You can always find something dry. Hey, it's Greg here with Outdoors on the Cheap, and I'm out here in the woods getting kind of thirsty, thinking I want a cup of tea. Making this video to sort of speak to a comment I got recently where I was talking about how you don't need to baton wood in a real forest, a wild forest, because there's plenty of things lying around to light a fire. And a lot of people getting hot under the collar. I'm guessing they spend a lot of money on big hefty knives that can be beat all day for batoning. But you know, if you bought a big hefty knife just for batoning, I think you wasted your money. I think, you know, you just don't need to baton wood in a real forest. There's plenty of things you can find that will burn. It rained all day yesterday. It's cold today. It's you know, around 0 Celsius. Everything that was wet is still kind of wet, right? But the point is that if you understand the ecology of a forest, you know what to look for and how to find it, and what materials tend to be dry even when everything else is wet. If you understand the woods, if you understand your woods, I'm not saying you can drop me off anywhere in the world and I'll know what to do. I live in Nova Scotia, Canada. I live in a certain part of Nova Scotia, Canada. I know what's available here and I know how to survive in it, okay? I've been doing it since I was a child. I spent a lot of time in the woods. I know what to look for, okay? So I'm going to light a fire today. I don't even think I have a Bic lighter. So let's do the bushcraft thing and use the ferro rod just to make it extra interesting, okay? Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is gather some materials to get the initial fire started, right? Some tinder and some kindling. Okay, let's go find some. Okay, right off, I see this dead tree. It's, I mean, there's dampness there. Right, so this is not what I would call primary kindling. I call this secondary kindling. You know, what you put on the fire once it's going, because it's easy to gather. And you know, as a general rule, the more paper-like something is, the more paper-like it is. All right, so that's not bad. Just put that over by the fire there. Here's some other useful stuff, the sort of thing that dries out quickly. These fine twigs. Notice I'm not pulling anything off the ground. Or you want things that are up in the trees, like these fine little twigs, right? I mean, why do I need to baton and make feather sticks when I can just easily gather stuff like this? And it's everywhere. Okay, some of it's more damp than other things, but you get enough of a nest of it together, it'll burn. Over here, and I'm only walking about 15-20 feet from where I tend to have my fire, I see an old birch bark tree. Didn't have to go far for that. Right, with plenty of stuff I can grab. And if I look far enough, there's another one over there. Right, and there's probably a few of them around. Right, in this part of the province, we got spruce and we got birch and we got maple. Now, from a fire starting point of view, the maple's practically useless. It's a great firewood, but not a good fire starting wood. And the great thing about the birch bark is that it'll always burn when it's wet. Right? And if you're in the woods and you intend to have a fire, you should always have an eye for birch bark, right? And gather it whenever you see it. If you're walking in the woods, at some point that day you want to have a fire, you grab a bundle like this, put it in one of your back pockets, grab another bundle, put it in your other back pocket. Right, then you get a great kindling and tinder. This will take a spark. Okay, so I'm going to continue to gather twigs, pieces of dead trees, and birch bark like this. Get a good pile, and I'll see you in a few minutes. All right, so here I got a range of materials, okay? These are just dead lower branches off of trees, okay? I think one of the problems people have is that when they go in the woods, their experience of making fires is in people's backyards. So they're looking for things that are familiar to them in people's backyards. But in a forest like this, a spruce forest, a lot of trees, not every tree, but a lot of trees have like 2 or 3 branches like this that are broken off at the bottom. They're dead. They've been dead for a while, and they're usually dry because they're underneath the tree. Okay, so I mean, in an area about, these are all lower branches from a tree, from trees. Okay, and I got them in an area about 15-foot radius. Okay, and I just calmly, slowly, you know, just walked around and gathered an armload of these. Okay, then there was no large amount in any one place. You just grab a couple here, a couple there, and before you know it, you've got an armload of wood. Okay, that's probably enough to boil a bottle of water. I also found a couple sort of dead trees. I'm going to use these for what I call a floor underneath, but these were just, you can see they weren't sawed or cut. I just bashed them. I have sort of tipped over tree here that I'm sitting on. Okay, I just smashed them over this and broke them into pieces. Right, so I'll lay these across the snow to make a floor. You can light a fire right on snow, but they burn better if you make a wooden floor. And this wood is not perfectly dry, but it's drier than snow. Right, so that's what I've got. I got a little bit of this flaky stuff, and I got some of this really fine stuff. Okay, really fine twigs. That's going to be my kindling, and this birch bark is going to be dual purpose tinder and kindling. Okay, you can use that to take a spark, but also to get this stuff going. And the combination of all that should get a fire going. So let's get started here. Starting a fire with birch bark, you want to have lots of little bits kicking around, right? It's handy to just, you got the outer stuff and it's reasonably dry, crinkle it up like that. Okay, make lots of bits like that. You can also scuff up the surface and use the outside, not the inside. Now we got all kinds of birch bark dust. There we go, we got fire. This birch bark's kind of wet, so it doesn't want to light. Hoping I don't lose it here. I mean, birch bark will light when it's wet, but it can be reluctant, and you don't want to rush it. You don't want to force it either. Very wet. Everything's wet today. We had lots of rain yesterday. It's starting to cooperate now. But we can still lose this. There's a point where you can really tell when it's going. You gotta wait for that point. Otherwise you can just snuff it out. Once it gets going, it kind of wants to continue to go. But you gotta get it to that point. And there's different kinds of fire lays depending on how you're setting up a fire, and I've done videos on that. And I'm just doing like a quick, you know, kind of like lunch fire, right? Just making some tea. I just realized I gotta move my camera because it's getting in the smoke and I don't want to mess up the lens. Move my camera back a little bit here. Okay, now I got this really wet birch bark I can throw on there. Now we're going for broke. Okay, now I'm putting this slightly damp spruce boughs on top of that. And all this heat from the birch bark is helping things to ignite. So I don't want to waste that heat. Right? I want to get things going. So I'm just making a very kind of loose teepee. I throw a little bit more birch bark in there. I'll save a little bit just in case the fire gets a bit difficult. standing so close to the fire right now, it just wants to come to me, which I don't want. Wherever I go, the fire is following me. So you see now I'm committing everything. The idea is to take a sapling, okay? And I say it's about 3/4, this is maple, 3/4 inch in diameter at the end, okay? And around the middle, you just sort of work it a little bit, okay? Little heat from the fire. Work it a little bit. What you're doing is you're bending it over the fire. You're going to use this to hold the water bottle. Doesn't take much. I mean, basically we got steam, we got heat, right? And with that we can bend. It might break or crack a little bit. That's okay as long as it... Here, so we got a bit of a crack there. That's not the end of the world. Okay, that's fine. So, right where the wood cracks, right, you just bind it together like that, right? Wrap the tree around itself. Now you've got a reasonably good bottle holder, okay? Now we just put our snow in. Not a lot. If you fill it with snow, it'll take a while to cook. You just put a little bit. Okay, and you hold that over your fire. You see how little work went into getting that fire going, right? You see that I just had to wander around a very small area for about 5 minutes. And, oh, my hands are getting cold. I had to wander around, you know, I would say an area of about a 20-foot radius, okay? I just wandered around that and gathered what I needed to make my fire. I didn't have to split anything. I didn't have to make any feather sticks. I didn't have to do any of that stuff because it's unnecessary in a wild forest situation. Snow is a bit of a pain to melt over a fire, but it's not impossible. One good thing about snow is that it's at least sterile, right? I mean, if you're really thirsty, all you got to do is melt it. You don't need to bring it to a boil. Unless you're really worried it's got animal droppings or something in it, right? But as a general rule. And you see how easy it is to control everything with this stick. I'm not saying it's going to hold 99% of the time, and if you've got wire or something like that, you can fasten it around tighter, and there's other ways to attach the wood to itself. This is using the brake is about the laziest way. It's not the most reliable way. Right, the wood could loosen up and I could lose the bottle. It's possible, right? All I'm doing right now is I'm not boiling water, I'm melting snow. You get a little bit of water in there, you heat the water up, you melt the snow, and you just add more and add more. Now the fire's going really good now, right? Got a good heat. Now, I mean, I should talk about the idea of, you know, trying to get a big fire going without an axe, without a saw, just using what you can find, right? It was easy to start a small fire like this. If I wanted to make a big fire, it'd be the same idea. I just gather more dead trees. There's dead trees all around me here, and some of them are dead standing, some of them are slightly tipped over. You don't want to gather up anything off the forest floor because it's going to be very, very wet, have a lot of moisture in it. But if you can get a fire going like this, if you can get a small fire going, you can get a big fire going. If there's dead trees around, and if you're in a wild forest, there should be lots of dead trees. How much water we got there? We're still not going good yet. Problem with snow is that it's got a lot of air in it, so it takes a while. It takes a lot of snow to make a little bit of water. Stirring helps. Moving the bottle around helps. Compressing the snow helps. Right? If you put it in the bottle all fluffy, it's not going to melt as quickly as if you ball it up with your hand. And yeah, it makes your hand cold, but you can just put your hand near the fire and warm it up. Right? That's the great thing about fire. It solves a lot of problems. Alright, so I can tell by the sound and the look of things that our water's boiling now. Time to take it off and put my tea bag in. Alright, just set her down there. Got a tea bag. I'll stick that in. Alright, make sure that doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, that's pretty much secure. But you can see this still holds it fine, right? And this works because at the very mouth of the bottle, it's got a little bit of a lip, right? So this thing can grab onto it. And again, there's other ways to make it more secure if you're worried about it failing. I'll show you those when things have cooled down a little bit. But actually, I can probably do that while this is just sitting. Let me just see here. Let's undo this. All right. So the other way you can suspend the bottle over the fire is to just take some, sort of throwaway cord like this, bank line, right? Double it over and just make a reef knot. So you double it over, make a reef knot there. Cut that off. Do the same thing at the other end. I don't know why the smoke's going right in my eyes. Same thing right at the other end, as tight as you can get it. Okay. Reef knot. Okay. Now that you got your reef knot, you can get the lip of the jar between them like that, right? And then you just suspend this over the fire and it'll hold, okay? And the beefier the stick, the better, right? But that'll work just fine. I think this is fine for drinking, so let's have a sip of tea. Now, I could drink right out of this, but I always bring a second cup. If I got a lunch or something like that, I just use the second cup as a kind of lunch pail, right? Also metal, also cookable, and this one here, I've actually got some electrical tape around it just to have a little bit of electrical tape, right? It's always good to have containers with you in the woods. It's always good to have a plan B and a plan C and that sort of thing, right? If water was at a premium and you had to boil as much as you possibly could and hold as much as you possibly could, you'd want to have extra containers, right? And something indestructible like this is great. But also, I just prefer drinking a hot drink out of a wide mouth container, right? This cup also fits, the bottle fits perfectly into the cup. The one great thing about using snow as water is that if your tea's too hot, you can just put a little bit of snow in the tea. Just don't use any of that yellow snow because, well, it's got a flavor, but it's not the flavor you want. Anyway, it's lovely tea. The fire's still going here. If I wanted to, I could build it up, but I'm not staying the night here today, so it's unnecessary. But yeah, not a big deal to get a fire going in the woods. You don't need to split wood, as I showed here. And I'm making as hard on myself as possible using the ferro rod. Normally when I'm in the woods, I don't muck around with ferro rods. I use a Bic lighter. But even with the ferro rod, starting it here, even after an entire day of rain, not a problem, right? You can always find something dry. And I looked at about 5 different birch trees. Within about, I had to roam a little farther to find birch trees. Let's say 25-foot radius. A couple of them had very poor birch bark. It was wet and soggy. And only one of the, well, there was, one of them was very young, so it didn't have a lot of nice papery stuff ready to come off. A couple of them were very old. Sometimes an old birch tree's got all kinds of good stuff on it, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're kind of useless. It really depends on the particular variety of birch and just how it's, you know, how long it's been dead or if it's still alive, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I found one old birch tree that just had the right kind of bark. And even then it was kind of difficult to get it to take a spark, but it was not impossible. It just took a little bit of persistence. Now when everything's really, really, really dry, getting stuff started with a ferro rod is easy. And when things are really wet, it's not impossible. It just takes a little bit more effort and a little more skill. But we overcame it. We had no problem getting a decent fire going here, warm enough to boil this water. So I'm gonna finish drinking my tea here. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. And until next time, enjoy the outdoors on the cheap. Thanks for watching.